Okay, we're 2 minutes past. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. I'm Shane O'Neill, Principal UC Architect here at Enterprise Solutions. And today we're talking about DEX. This is why should you care about it? And this is the first in our Happy User, Happy IT webinar series. What we're hoping to give you today is an understanding of DEX and why you should care about it. We're going to talk about what is DEX, why you should care about it, and how you can improve the DEX in your organization. If I have my slides lined up. So there we go. DEX is employee digital experience, but why do we care about it? Delighted that I'm joined by our industry expert today, Simon Townsend, who's Field CTO with ControlUp. So Simon, if you want to just go ahead and introduce yourself there.
Thank you, Shane. Good afternoon, everybody. Simon Townsend. I am the Field CTO for ControlUp, which means I probably spend about 50% of my time working with our customers and channel partners, and then the other 50% of my time working with our product management and development teams. To give you a little bit of background on me, I've been in the end user computing space for embarrassingly 2 decades now. That's how old we're getting. But yeah, I've been deploying Citrix, VMware, virtualized desktops like AVD, Windows 365, and traditional endpoints for many, many years. And as I said, now I'm at ControlUp and talking all about things DEX. So thank you very much for having me this afternoon. Greatly appreciated, Shane.
Yeah, no, excellent, Simon. So, if we have to break things down into a nutshell, DEX is a term that's being bandied about a lot at the moment. It's really, I'd say, over the last 12 to 18 months, we're starting to hear more and more about it. And it seems everywhere you look today, you're starting to hear about it. But, when we look at the DEX itself, it's kind of, I guess, we're moving away from what were the traditional user experience measurements that we started to talk about, log on things like that. And now we're looking at DEX as an overarching thing. Like, from your experience, like, how would you describe DEX to somebody who had never heard of it?
I think it really is all around measuring things at an employee level, not necessarily at an machine level or an infrastructure level. Monitoring tools have been around for decades, and depending on whether we've been delivering back-end storage, networking, front-end applications, virtualized desktops, or in fact even PCs, there's always been a number of monitoring tools that have been out there, monitoring the bits and the bytes. How much CPU and memory is my machine using? What's my network performing like from one site to another? What's the availability of my back-end storage like? But they've been very segmented, and they've also been very device-centric or machine infrastructure. Maturing those metrics, that data collection, combining it with a number of other things that are important to the user's experience. And then you end up with what arguably could be called a DEX management platform or digital employee experience management platform. And that's really what is, I think, interesting a lot of organizations at the moment. It's the reason why people like Gartner, who created this slide, are looking into this area. It's why organizations are now starting to take this concept of DEX much more seriously. And it's been driven by a number of different reasons. I think it has been fueled, but no, it's not the only cause, obviously, by hybrid work, right? I think we all now know that people have got the ability to work anywhere, and our employees are an important attribute that we want to keep happy. And really, if you were to take a step back for a second, Shane, and just think about why it's important to many organizations from a business point of view, I think what's happened is that people have started to realize that if you are trying to grow your organization, deliver a good service, whether that be in healthcare, better patient care, whether that's in finance, better customer care or faster transactions, whatever that might be, it starts with actually making sure that your employees are happy and that the tools that they're using are happy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that drives to one of the items that's there on the slide is the employee-centric IT experience. You know, traditionally, as you say, we've always looked at the back end, you know, how much memory, how much CPU is being focused. But really, you know, as you say, with the hybrid working and people, you know, anywhere, any device, any application, really how we're focusing on the end user now instead of the traditional metrics.
Yeah, yeah, and I think there is IT's got a job on its hands at the moment, right? It's not just the employee who's gone hybrid. Your infrastructure is now hybrid, right? You're a mixture of on-prem and in the cloud. You've got different applications. Some of those are traditional, dare I say, Windows type client server applications. Some of those are SaaS-based applications. You've got security. Obviously, that's still a big concern, and there's for many organizations there's a need to stay compliant and reduce risk, and so they're having to deal with that as well. And arguably, Microsoft coined this term, I think, but people need to do more. IT needs to somehow do more with less, and you almost need to bubble some of this up, right, to a little bit of a higher level and really be able to provide an SLA and serve your employee as opposed to necessarily the device or the network or the infrastructure or the application they're supporting. One of the key things that many customers see initially when they deploy a DEX solution, just as an example, is that the faster time to resolve and remediate tickets, a reduction in the number of tickets. And that's purely because across all of these things that we're talking about, when someone has an issue, it is easier if you've got an employee-centric view of what's happening, as opposed to having to go into 4 or 5 different tool sets to try and understand where that issue may lie.
Yeah. Quite often is if you're checking storage and then you're checking, the application logs or things like that, pulling it all together. It totally makes sense. One thing that draws my attention there on that side is, the first 5 I think would really resonate with people, but the bottom right-hand corner, the sustainability item. I don't think that's something people would really have thought about when they were thinking about DEX. Could you expand that one a little?
Yeah, of course. One of the most obvious examples I could give is the up and coming Windows 10 to Windows 11 migration that many organizations are going to go through. I think
Windows is going end of life already. Seems like we only just got there.
Yeah, exactly. I thought this was meant to be the last version of Windows ever, but it just so happened that we've got a new one to go to. So October next year, Windows 10 officially goes end of life. You can obviously pay for additional support if you want to, but that arguably starts to become quite expensive. And with that, I think Canalys reported that there was around 260 million devices out there that weren't potentially able to run Windows 11. And, even aside from the Windows migration, many organizations have got into this cadence of, we'll buy a PC for an employee and it'll last for 4 years and then we'll ship it out because it'll run out of RAM and it'll break. But actually, the truth of the fact is that lots of the machines that any of us have bought now in the last 4 or 5 years probably are good enough to continue serving us. Build quality is getting better. The amount of memory and CPU that it had them is good enough. So one of the things that a DEX platform can definitely help with, and it really comes down to at least at a machine level, is looking at what the workspace is that those employees are consuming, and does it really need a refresh, and therefore can it actually have a positive impact on sustainability? Because if you don't need to refresh it, then you really shouldn't be. And that applies to physical laptops and desktops, but it also applies to virtualization as an example, right? The amount of organizations that we speak to who have put, over-resourced their VDI, virtual desktop infrastructure environment, just because, they needed to, and to go on the safe side or have a backup data center. But as organizations now perhaps look at moving to the cloud, or in fact, even some organizations moving back from the cloud to on-prem, sizing that correctly and understanding and quantifying what the employee's experience is like, and whether they do need more memory, more CPU, a hardware refresh, a bigger virtualized desktop, whatever it might be. That's where I think DEX really comes into its own from a sustainability point of view, giving people visibility of what the employee's experience is like, to therefore make educated decisions on whether the organization should be investing more money in new hardware and therefore having an impact on their carbon footprint.
Yeah, and as you say, sustainability now is starting at the top, at the board level, and it's starting to filter down through organizations. So, more down on the ground level, we're starting to hear more about it. A question actually popped up there, because you've got cyber threats there. How do you balance your DEX goal against IT security requirements? That's a good one.
So someone mentioned to me this morning, I'm at an event this morning, by the way, in London, which is why you may hear a little bit of background noise. So I apologize for that. But someone actually mentioned that this morning, right? This, in one sense, you can imagine there's always been this pendulum that really shouldn't exist, by the way, that sort of swings between how do I give an employee the best experience, right? The most productive experience, the most frictionless experience. And yet, how do I balance that with making sure that they're compliant? One of the conversations, funnily enough, we were having this morning was around how do we put governance around AI, right? This is a classic example of the balancing act of, do you allow people to have access to AI so they can be more productive, or do you actually lock it down and prevent it because you're so worried about it? That's existed across IT for years and years and years, right? Do you give access? Do you give someone a VPN client? Do you give them local administrative privileges, et cetera, et cetera? But that pendulum really shouldn't be an if one side or the other. I think the biggest challenge that people face is that every organization knows now that there are best practices when it comes to securing their environment. And particularly, I'm going to focus on endpoint security for a second. But we all know that we need to patch our Windows endpoints. We all know that every other Tuesday there's new patches come out, and then we look at third-party tools to patch applications. And we know that there are zero-day vulnerabilities that come out across the organization. And we know that we've got policies and we end up with device drift, etc. The real challenge is that in many cases, those policies are set by security teams, but it's IT administrators and the people that own the desktop that are having to implement and ensure those changes and improvements are being made, those patches are being deployed. But it's actually got to the point now where IT is really struggling to keep up with the constant rate of that, right? Lots of these tools are set and forget type of technologies. You can go and scan, and I can go and scan my son's computer tomorrow, and it will come up with 3 or 4 vulnerabilities and 2 or 3
Oh dear. I think we're losing Simon there a little bit.
Spend time doing that over the next couple of days. I know for well. Oh, have you lost me?
You just broke up there for a second, Simon, but I think we have you.
Have you lost me?
Yeah, we have you again,
I
Simon.
apologize.
No, we'll blame the internet. It's always...
Where was I up to? Sorry.
You were talking around endpoint security.
Where was I up to?
IT trying to keep pace with the pace of vulnerabilities that are presenting themselves today.
Yeah. Let me see if I can just move a second to get a better signal. I apologies.
No, not at all.
Is that any better?
Yeah, we got you loud and clear.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think the challenge that many IT administrators face is just a constant rate of change from a security point of view. And one of the things that a DEX platform gives you is real-time visibility over your estate. And so if you can start to combine IT operations with, dare I say, security operations, and enable people to have greater visibility in real time and then remediate that, then that actually eases what the IT administrators are trying to do.
Yeah, excellent. I really like this slide that talks about an organization's DEX maturity. You know, how an organization can start at one level and
Yeah,
slowly work themselves up to being highly mature.
I
You
do.
know,
Yeah.
do you see organizations starting to look at wanting to get to this maturity level? Do you think many are there yet, or is everybody really still on the journey to get there?
Majority of people now appreciate that they need that foundation layer, right? And that foundation layer starts with real-time monitoring and visibility across any platform. If you're not monitoring it, you don't have observability over it, then obviously you're not able to collect that data and do something with it. And I think what people are really after at the moment is, regardless of how the digital workspace is being deployed down to their employees, whether it's physical, whether it's virtual, whether it's VDI, Windows apps, or whether it's SaaS, they want to have visibility over that so they can at least gather both real time and historical data so that they can either pinpoint an issue as it's happening or actually rewind when it's not.
Yeah, that's true. And you know,
Sorry, go on.
yeah, no, what I think was really interesting there is, like, you know, we've always had one of the layers there is automated remediation. And
Yeah.
you touched on it there a few minutes ago when you said about, you know, everyone's talking about AI these days. Where do you see the trend going with that, around people leveraging AI for those
Mm-hmm.
automated remediations and catching things before they happen and helping people really expand on the DEX maturity?
Yeah, interesting one. So in a lot of DEX solutions now, including ControlUps, they will typically have some form of automated remediation. So the ability to raise an event or a trigger, if you like, when something happens, and then to automatically or manually allow someone to go and remediate that. Classic example could well be, you know, a process that is running on a virtual desktop somewhere. It's impacted more than just one user. The ability to be alerted and set a trigger that CPU spike has happened, that it's affecting performance, and then allow some form of remediation that would go and log that user off or shut that process down, particularly if it was a crashed or a hung process, as an example. Automated remediation is obviously very, very powerful in terms of allowing IT to get on and do more with less, because the more that you can automate based on these triggers that are being raised and the remediation, the more, obviously, you know, an IT support ticket doesn't need to be raised. Someone from IT doesn't need to get involved. AI is going to play a very, very important part in spotting those anomalies in an environment and being able to raise those up to the right level within IT to say, hey, there is a number of times those triggers have happened. There's a number of times that we are automatically remediating something. Maybe you should go ahead and actually do something about it. Interestingly, what will happen, Shane, is that whilst AI integrations are at the top of this maturity level at the moment, they will ultimately, as AI becomes mainstream and is built into products like ControlUp, AI will actually drop down and actually become a sub-tool or sub-component of automated remediation. But it plays a very, very important part. If you think about all of the data points that you're collecting across your estate, AI really does, particularly generative AI, plays a very, very important part in allowing people in IT to truly get to the bottom of the root cause very, very quickly across a very, very large data set.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting times ahead with seeing how that plays out in the EUC space. So
Yeah.
we've touched on the what and the why about DEX, and I guess now it's kind of like the how an organization can look at their DEX, and I know ControlUp, you guys are positioning yourself and really investing on being the industry leader when it comes to DEX. You see there any desktop, any application, any location.
Yeah.
When we talk about the desktops, like there's practically nothing there that ControlUp can't measure today. It's touching everything.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, I mean, for the purpose of the people on the call, ControlUp has been around now for about 10 or 11 years and has made its name arguably in the Citrix and VMware VDI space. If if you wanted instant, real-time insights into what was going on in your on-prem virtual desktop environment, ControlUp has been the number one product that people have gone to. But what we've done, particularly over the last 2 to 3 years, is expand that out to ensure that we're actually supporting more than just that infrastructure, more than just that deployment method. So you'll see there, you've got the Microsoft logo. So it doesn't matter whether it's Azure Virtual Desktop, Windows 365. In fact, I would expand that out. We've got people that are deploying desktops virtually with technologies like Parallels and AWS and WorkSpot, and there's a whole ream of different virtualized desktop providers out there, and we can support those. But it's also super important to make sure that we're capturing what's going on the endpoint, because you really do need end-to-end visibility of what's going on, and that could be an endpoint like an iGel device that's connecting into a virtualized environment, so some form of thin OS, or it could be a complete standalone machine. There's 170 million estimated Windows desktops under Intune management out there today. And those employees, they wake up every single day, they use their Windows desktop, they're using Windows 10, hopefully they're going to be using Windows 11. They run lots of things locally, and then they access SaaS-based applications. You need to be able to monitor those devices as well. And that's what we mean by any desktop. Linux, Mac, Windows, physical or virtual, that is the workhorse of the workspace, at least for now. And that's where, when we talk about measuring any desktop and having a DEX solution, we're supporting all of those different delivery mechanisms.
And I love your point there on the physical devices, because I feel in recent years they've kind of been forgotten about because they've become so beefy and so powerful. People think, oh yeah, desktop's got plenty of resources, we don't have to worry about it. But with modern applications, Office, Teams, that's not the case anymore.
It's not the case. And actually, when you drill down into any location, and you start to think about where those devices are, they're actually the ones that typically are at the end of a smaller or a thinner piece of string, right? They're the ones that are being run on an employee's home Wi-Fi network from the third bedroom or from their office if they're lucky enough to have one. And it's actually, that tends to be one of the key areas where problems exist. Not, for instance, the Azure data center. I think I logged onto my AVD desktop the other day, and I got something like I can't remember what it was, a 3 terabyte download speed or something ridiculous, right? There's no problem with the back end speed of that. Where the problem tends to exist is 3:30 when my son comes home and starts playing on the computer, and the kids then come home, and all of a sudden the Wi-Fi is under stress.
I have the exact same problem here. Roblox is the one here that eats up the bandwidth.
There you go.
Question came in there, Simon, and I believe the answer is yes, but I'll let you expand on it. Has the ControlUp Intune integration been released yet? I believe it has.
That's a really good question. So yes, it has. And so what happens there, to answer that question, is that we have got a Chromium-based plugin that you can download from the Google Chrome store, as an example. So if you go into Google, go to the Chrome store, you'll see that there is a ControlUp plugin. And that basically means, very cleverly, that if you then go into either Intune or ServiceNow, because we support ServiceNow with this as well, and you're looking at a machine within the Intune menu, you'll have what's called a blade, a pop-up blade that will come out, and it will link the ControlUp metrics that we're gathering and lay that side by side so that an IT administrator arguably can have a single view of a particular machine in their environment with the DEX metrics layered on top. And you've got the ability to see for that particular machine in Intune what's going on in terms of employee experience, network connectivity, trace route. You can either remote control and send commands down to that machine from that console as well.
Super, thanks, Simon. We talked about the desktops, but the applications, and I think this is one that I really resonates with me, because in Compass there you've got the unified communications. You know, we're on Zoom now. Everybody's using Teams every day, and even before this, I was talking to someone internally, and he said to me, "What's wrong with my Teams today? Nothing's working in it." So, you know, being able to bring that in and measure that as part of your overall DEX, I think is something that will resonate with people, because it's ubiquitous. We all have to use unified comms, but it's very difficult to really see under the hood and what's going on with them.
Yeah, 100%. So there's a couple of things to talk through here, I think, which is, and sadly, it's happening to me right now as I sit in the middle of London in a very old-fashioned building at the event. The Wi-Fi is dropping in and out, which is affecting my team, our Zoom call that we're on. When I finish this call, I would be able to go into my DEX management tool, and I will actually be able to see the results of this call. And I'll be able to see what happened from an audio point of view, a video frame rate point of view, a screen sharing point of view. And I will ultimately get given a score. And that score in this particular case is probably going to be somewhere between medium to low because of the challenges that we've had. And so not only will IT now know that I've experienced a problem, but they would then be able to drill down into that issue. And because I've got ControlUp installed on my machine, see that actually at the time I was having the problem, my Wi-Fi was, you know, at 40 or 50%, and actually I was dropping in. My trace route perhaps wasn't performing in the same way that it should. So actually we can pinpoint the fact that it was a Wi-Fi problem at that moment in time, and hence why I was actually experiencing issues. So being able to monitor not just machines, physical, virtual, not just traditional Windows 32-bit, 64-bit type applications, but those unified communications tools is incredibly important. The other thing that you'll see in there is SaaS, and I think what we're starting to see now is that every single organization has got, you know, at least 5, 6, 7 SaaS-based applications that an employee may use at any one given time. And whilst those Windows-based applications are not going away, if you're buying a net new application today, you're probably buying it from a SaaS point of view, and it's going to operate through a web browser. So being able to monitor those applications as well is going to become increasingly important, because if my client, my network, or in fact the SaaS provider is having an issue, again, we need to be able to pinpoint where does the problem lie, and is it having an overall effect on the particular employee.
Yeah, excellent.
The other thing I might say, Shane, here is that, you know, we've spoken a lot. I'm very conscious of this. We've spoken a lot around how we might monitor virtual machines, how we might monitor physical desktops, how we monitor unified communications, SaaS-based apps, even network. Where the real clever bit comes in is when you start to aggregate all of that and actually start to provide a DEX employee score. Because actually what you don't want to be doing is just getting a load of alerts and having to identify that there was a network problem, there was a CPU problem, there was a unified communications problem. In the first instance, what IT really need is a much higher level view of the world that says, actually, across my estate of 500 to 1,000 employees, am I delivering a good experience when it comes to the digital workplace? Are we scoring 9s and 10s, right? Is everything green? And if there is something that is red, who is red, and then give me the ability to drill down very, very quickly and get to and pinpoint what was going on, so that I can potentially look into resolving that. Mm-hmm. And that's what when we go back to that pyramid and we look at the maturity level, when we start to get towards the top of that, and you look at some of the things that we're working on and bringing out to market just next quarter, it's all around aggregating that information and producing employee dashboards, employee scores, so that you can actually have a better job of spotting any of those anomalies.
Yeah.
Which continues to be a word I can't say today. I apologize.
It's kind of become one metric to rule them all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I like that. And lastly here, you touched on, so we've any desktop, any application, and then any location. So people could be anywhere. We never know.
Yeah, and I think that's important for two reasons. Number one, if you are deploying a virtual desktop or a desktop as a service type solution, you really do need visibility into where that person is coming from, so you can make educated improvements on and do things like remediation correctly, because you could end up with 100 users who are all sat in one location getting a great experience, but you've got an office, I don't know, some other part of the world, and being able to put some sort of geolocation on that and actually understand what's going on. It allows you to really hone in on where does the issue lie. And I think that's also important when it comes to location, when you start to look at the security elements that we were talking about before, Shane. So the further away a device goes from the corporate network, I think we all appreciate this, the more difficult it is to keep up to date, patched, and understand what's going on that environment, because it naturally goes offline more regularly. It's connected in more modern ways. It's not within the boundaries of the organization and the corporate firewall. So very, very important when you start to look at remote machines and things like vulnerability assessment and device drift.
Yeah, very true. The world is changing, as you say, and we could be anywhere. So you're just wrapping up with you say, what is the vision for ControlUp for this year? Any desktop, any application, any location, to be the ultimate DEX products that is out there.
Yeah.
What do you see on the horizon for ControlUp this year?
So couple of things. Number one, looking more deeper into the browser, the plugins, the SaaS-based applications that people are using, because I think that is super, super important. A continuation of what we're doing in the unified communication space. So looking at other unified communications tools and helping organizations that might be looking at things like call center type of environments. Security, I think we've mentioned a couple of times now, but bringing in real-time information from the endpoint around patching vulnerabilities and device posture. And I think the most important thing is really, how do we actually give an employee-centric view of the world? So there's a real focus, particularly from a development innovation point of view. You're going to see AI come into the product. You're going to see new employee scoring come into the product, employee dashboards, far more interactive ways to look at things from an employee-centric point of view, because they may be logged onto multiple devices, multiple virtual machines, multiple endpoints, and actually have a much more holistic view of the world with that drill down that I spoke about before. Yeah. I think the other thing that we're starting to see, just to finish up on there, Shane, and you know this because you've got a couple of organizations that have already gone down this road, is this isn't just about the virtual desktop environment anymore. And there are a huge number of tools that are typically used when someone does unified endpoint management, when they do endpoint security, and when they do DEX. And what you're going to start to see is a number of those tools start to converge. And hopefully what that means is that many of your customers are going to start to be able to save some of the money they're spending on all of these tools as this market starts to consolidate. And I'll give you just two real examples of that straight away, which is someone who has got 100 physical PCs today will be paying for a patch management solution, might be paying for a vulnerability assessment solution. They'll be using group policy or Intune. They'll also be using probably a technology that does some form of remote control so that IT can log on to someone's device and help them when they've got a problem. They'll be using a separate ITSM tool like ServiceNow or a ticket management system. And then they'll also want some form of DEX, right? Employee performance metrics. You know as well as I do, Shane, that a lot of what I've just spoken about is either in our solution or is coming to our solution very quickly.
Yeah.
And we're able to integrate with some of those other ones. The question about Intune integration, questions around ITSM integration, you're going to be in a world where your DEX tool actually starts to become a management tool and an IT security operations tool, and then integrates with things like service management for even improved automation. So I think things are going to get very, very exciting very quickly.
Great stuff. Yeah, exciting times ahead. So there's one question that has come in here just to wrap things up, Simon. How would you your DEX approach for Chromebooks? Does ControlUp work for Chromebooks today?
We do not work with Chromebooks today, but it is something that a number of our customers have asked both ourselves and Google for. And so I would suggest that you just keep an eye on the ControlUp news, blog, websites over the coming year. I can tell you that there's nothing immediately in the short term. In other words, you're not going to see something in the next quarter, but it is something that we are doing some research and development on, and it is something that comes up quite a lot. If you look at how we gather information from things like Citrix, from VMware, from the underlying AVD architecture, from how we look at the virtual layer underneath the virtual machine, the hypervisor layer, how we go and use APIs to look at my Zoom calls and my Teams calls to get some of that data. There are various different ways in which ControlUp could gather information on Chromebooks from either the backend management platform and to the very clever, whoever it was it Martin? No, Paul Matthews. Great question. He sort of hinted, why don't you have a Chrome plugin that does the same thing? I mean, as we start to look at monitoring and doing more with SaaS-based applications, that could well be a possibility.
Brilliant, thanks for that.
Never say never is what I will say. Never say never.
Good stuff, good stuff. So we're going to wrap things up here. My thank you to Simon. As always, it's a pleasure to talk to you. You've got great insights industry out there, so I hope everybody enjoyed hearing your thoughts today. For our attendees, please don't forget that we do have a competition. If you attend all 3 webinars in our series, we will invest in your happiness. So you can win a voucher up to the value of €1,000 for something to make you happy, be that a spa day, gym membership, whatever works for you. The next webinar in our series, which will cover the foundation to improve your DEX, where we'll be covering things at the infrastructure layer, best practices, how you can make sure that you're resilient, that you end up providing your end user with the happy experience. And that is on the 16th of April. And you can scan the QR code to register there or check out our website. Once again, Simon, thank you very much for your time today. Absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks for everyone joining. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone, and have a good rest of the day. Talk to you soon.
Enjoy. Thank you, Shane.